All right, we are live. Welcome back, everyone, into the Prospero.ai stock market live streams. I am Steven, and I am going to kick us off today. Hopefully, you had a great weekend. Obviously, the markets are a bit red this morning after we had also a red Friday. So, taking a bit of a downturn overall in the markets. If you're someone who gets our Sunday newsletters, you obviously saw that there's been a big shift in the perspective of George as he looks at the signals that are available within the Prospero app. We saw the SPY and QQQ as low as 0 this past week. Let's take a live look at them and see if they're still down at those lower levels. Let's see. So the SPY is at 0 and the QQQ is at holding 3. So both down at very bearish low levels. And that is the shift in mindset that George has had. And I'm sure he'll let you know all about it when I talk to him when he shows up on the stream this morning. Let me just ask you guys if you could do me a favor before we get into the topics that we're going to discuss today and like the video so that we hit a new all-time high. I think our all-time high in likes is about 21, so maybe we could get up there today. I'll do you guys. Ooh, we're already at 9, so thank you all for the good start today. Thank you for being in here. So some of the topics we are going to discuss is obviously the momentum stocks taking a leg lower. A lot of the high flyers in the market that had started 2025 so well have had a bit of a give back in the recent days. Is that something that will continue, or is that just a counter trend that is offering an opportunity? We had Steve Cohen making comments about how he was bearish on Friday. That kind of led the market lower as Friday was a pretty bad day for most stocks. Then we have a big event this week in NVIDIA earnings, and it is actually their first report since the DeepSeek announcement. So are they going to mention that directly, and what are they going to say about the state of AI on their report, and how much do their actual earnings this quarter versus future projections because of this latest update with DeepSeek? And I see a comment from D. Curtin. This is my first live stream. Been very busy at work a couple of weeks ago. You were looking at some suggestions. I'd love coverage, insight on MPWR. Well, D. Curtin, I will make sure to ask George about it when he gets in here. Let's see if it's in our signals, because that is, yes, it is. Okay. So I'll just let you guys know right now. Upside is 60, downside is 39, profitability 84, net option sentiment 73. It looks pretty good in the signals to me, but we'll see what George has to say about it. Also curious how to value the small reactor companies such as Oklo, not on Prospero. D. Curtin, stick around. We will definitely get into your questions and concerns just a little later on. More topics we're going to discuss today is I want to ask George which is the most shocking stock move of 2025 so far to him out of these 4 companies: Celsius, Alibaba, Tesla, and SMCI. And I'll let you know just how much they've moved this year, all 4 of them, when we get to that topic later on. Then we have Warren Buffett giving an update on his cash pile, which is just growing and growing and growing and growing. It has hit a new all-time high of $334 billion. So what is Buffett preparing for? As the market recently starts to give back a little bit, will anything become attractive enough for him to offload some of that cash into some stocks? Then we have a couple more stories. We have Apple planning to spend $500 billion on AI infrastructure and expansion plans of their business into the USA over the next 4 years. This is expected to create around 20,000 jobs. And what people are saying is that this is Apple's way of trying to avoid being affected by the tariffs that could possibly come on to their business from Trump administration in China. So will it work? And is this a good business move for them? We have a lot of topics today. Then I have a topic about Robinhood. If you're a usual viewer of our streams, you probably know that George has been a little bit more bullish around the crypto industry, specifically Coinbase, because of the Trump trade that had affected stocks like Palantir, the crypto areas of the market, Tesla. But how is he feeling now after this shift with a lot of the more bearish feelings that he has about the crypto industry? Does this Robinhood story where the SEC has dismissed their investigation into the Robinhood crypto unit, does that make him even more bullish? how is he feeling today about that area of the market. Then if you guys open Prospero today, you might have noticed that institutional flow is now technical flow in the app. So we'll discuss that. I think we might actually even start off with that today. What it means, why we changed it, why it's important, and what you should know, all of the good stuff about the technical flow signal that is now in the app. And then last but not least, if we can get through all that and we still have time, I want to ask George, is it the time to invest in international companies over USA companies with the bit of bearishness that we have going on in the market? I'm pretty sure I saw consumer confidence came in at a 15-month low for USA consumers. So it doesn't seem like the best business environment, current economy going on. Let's look at the market performance today. I think the QQQ is down over 1% the last time I looked. Okay, so since we started the stream, maybe the stream's a bit of a bullish indicator today. We are slightly up, but we're still red overall. So we're down about 0.75% in the QQQ, 0.3% in the SPY. The Dow is the only index that is slightly green, up 0.1% today. And then the Russell is down 0.2%. So mixed markets, mostly red, slight comeback going on right now. We'll see if that's able to continue or not. As always, let me just say, if anybody who's watching the stream, we've had over 250 people already. If you have any questions, concerns, stocks you want to look at, feel free to comment them. We'll get to all of them, like D. Curtin has mentioned in the chat with his comments. So you can type those away right now. At some point, we will definitely answer them on the stream just for you. Let's see if there's anything interesting going on in the Prospero app, in our bull lists, or anything else. See if anything is surprising going on there today. GME is still hanging strong on the short-term bull list, which is just 10 stocks in the app. It's the first thing you're able to look at when you open the app. So if we have any GME, I feel like a lot of people who watch the streams and watch our videos are interested in that company. Still on the short-term bull list with an 81 at upside and 89 net option sentiment, 91 social sentiment. So leading in a lot of signals. A stock that's made a crazy move this year. Like I said, it's going to be one of the 4 companies that I posed to George is Alibaba. I think they're giving a little bit back today, but they were ripping last week. So their upside is still 96, net option still 98. So their signals are still looking strong in Prospero. Let's see. JD.com and Baidu and Pinduoduo and Alibaba are all on this list. So you have four Chinese stocks on that list. That's pretty surprising that they make up that much of it. I think I've seen a lot of people talking about Snowflake recently. That's one of the stocks also on this list with a 94 net option sentiment, 71 upside, 29 downside. Only 43 profitability though, so a little bit of a lower signal there. Oh, and it finally happened last week. We were covering it a bit on the stream. Meta's historic rally where it just day after day after day. I'm not sure where the streak ended. I think 21 or 22 straight days of green before it finally went red. And now since then, it was actually, I think it might have been, was it Monday last week? Or was it Friday the week before? Either way, it's now given back about maybe 6 or 7% since its peak. So once that streak broke, it looks like the bears are out in full effect. Okay, so we have some time now. Oh, George just entered the stream. Welcome, George.
Sorry about the little delay.
No problem. Let me just say to all of our viewers that are in here right now, if you're watching on YouTube, we have links in the description. So you can click any one of those and it'll take you to either our Instagram, Discord, Twitter, TikTok, or what we also do is if you can't catch these streams live, they're always available on YouTube, but if it's easier for you and you like listening to stuff on Spotify, they also are posted to Spotify later the same day. So You could click any of those links and follow us on all of our different social media platforms. I've seen George recently being active in the Discord, so maybe you guys want to hop in there and join that, get a little bit of the inside scoop on things. Our website is also on there too if you want to click around there. We post blogs there, and there's other information on there. But without further ado, I think we should get right into the market action we've been seeing we opened up today and even Friday, where a lot of the momentum stocks, a lot of the growthier stocks, and really just the overall market kind of took a hit. And the newsletter, you guys shared a big shift in your perspective, feeling a bit more bearish, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The Steve Cohen comments kind of helped you, I think, form your thesis recently, and how he was talking negatively about the market. But if you just want to update all of our viewers on how you're feeling and what you're seeing to lead you to switch up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing to remember about institutional investors is that any volatility is helpful to them. But if it's political volatility based on, announcements from the president, that's not helpful, because in the regular market volatility, that might feel a lot more volatile to retail investors. A lot of the time that volatility is caused by institutions that are either swing trading, that either feel that the market should be trading or certain stocks should be trading in certain channels, and those algorithms are kind of reinforcing. So when a politician is frequently moving it, that means that politician is in control of the market. And institutions don't really like anyone other than them being in control of the market. So I think what we observed, or what my interpretation of the events on Friday that have continued into today, is very much, I think, Wall Street reminding the government that they don't like uncertainty and volatility caused by them, right? Because what they can essentially say is, okay, if you're going to cause fears in the market around tariffs, like, we can lean into that and make money, right? Can you afford in your, as your presidency is coming in, as you're making all these changes, can you afford to have us tanking the market? We can afford to short it all day long, right? And I think that was the subtext of what's going on, that it's just like, hey, if you don't stabilize this, if you don't actually do what we thought we were voting for you, right? I think a lot of Wall Street thought that they were voting for Trump, and that would support the market, that the market would do well, right? So if they're saying, you're not going to give us what we voted for, right? We have no problem leaning in to this and making money off of the uncertainty, because we could basically say, okay, what Cohen said is like, okay, now I'm bearish, now I'm worried, right? A lot of people follow Cohen, have for a long time. So to me, that sends a clear message. That's basically like, okay, unless you stabilize this in the bull direction that we expected, we are going to push the market down in a concerted effort.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like that's something that, you're not going to hear on one of the mainstream things, because it's a little bit of the, like, you're pulling the curtain back on what's actually going on. But what you're talking about, that's a bit of like a manufacturing of bearishness, I feel like. Do you think there's any like real truth? Because I know I saw consumer confidence coming at like a 15-month low. So do you think this bearish turn is really Wall Street flexing its muscles, or do you think there's underlying real issues? How do you weigh out those two things?
Most of the time, the market is like, quote unquote, manufactured, right? When we were talking about, the bull market, right? It was a bit manufactured, right? It was manufactured over expectations that Trump would support the market on an ongoing basis, right? Because we talked about this all the time, that valuations were very expensive, especially compared to historical levels, right? So a lot of people could say the ongoing bull market was a bit manufactured. And this is actually more of a natural correction, right? If Trump is not going to support the market as expected, support these very high valuations, and instead is going to add uncertainty, right? To me, it actually seems like the bull market was being more manufactured than a bear turn to correct closer to historical valuations.
A very, very good point right there. I want to get to D. Curtin's questions because he asked them before you entered the stream and he's been waiting. So he was asking about MPWR. Signals look pretty decent just from a quick glance in Prospero. And then a stock that's not in Prospero, Oklo. How should he, in his investing, like go about valuing a small company like that and other reactor companies like it?
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to get it. We'd love to get those in, but I mean, the second one is easy. Like, I don't think you can get a good value on these small stocks that are speculated on. You can play the momentum, right? And you can say, okay, where is that at? Do I feel like this still has momentum or does it not, right? Because that's what a lot of people are playing. The value of it is bogus, right? I think you can look at any of those stocks, whether it be, quantum or nuclear or whatever, even like, what's that big nuclear one that we've like invested in at times? I feel like it's also like a C name. Anyway, it's all overvalued, right? So you can't look to value. You can say, do I feel like the momentum's there, right? And that's really, it's kind of hard to interpret that, and that's why we don't like really touch stocks that we feel are momentum only, right? We'll look to have strength in the signals in addition to that momentum, use the signals to read the momentum, but no, I wouldn't touch Oklo. I know a lot of people are shorting it. MPWR, it looks okay in the signals. I'm familiar with that stock because we've owned it at different times. Compared to its historical averages, it doesn't look very good. And in terms of raw numbers, it's not really in the range that we would add, especially not in our high conviction portfolio.
Well, you mentioned momentum, and I just want to bring this up real quickly. Palantir, because it was live on stream last week when you broke the news that the CEO had sold over $1 billion of shares. Is there any level that becomes attractive to you? And I think it touched 89 this morning, a big pullback. When we were talking about it, it was like 115 or so. So it's gone down a lot lower since in just a week. How are you feeling about it?
Option sentiment opened at 75, which is not really what we would add it at. We would probably only add it if we saw it at 80 or above. Now it's at 51. It doesn't look like option sentiment is there. I mean, upside is at 97, so it still looks like something that people have faith in long term, but that option sentiment would have to get higher for us to be interested.
So the biggest event probably of this week is the NVIDIA earnings, which are going to take place Wednesday after the closing bell. It's the first earnings report since the DeepSeek saga happened and all of that news. Do you think they will mention that directly in their earnings or will be asked about it on the call? How important is what they say about that versus the actual earnings that they report in this upcoming earnings?
That's going to be very interesting, right? I think how they address DeepSeek, I think if they don't have a good response to it, they're going to have some kind of response. But if they don't have a good response and they don't address DeepSeek, I think that's even more telling. And I think that's what I would expect, but hopefully, they have a good response to it. Jensen Huang's really good at this stuff, but it's an existential threat and a serious existential threat. So it becomes pretty hard. Why did we drop coin and add app? Coin net option sentiment was down to 94, and app stayed at 97. Really that simple. And for a stock that coin was at 100 and is down to 94, that seemed like the better risk management. And app, it was green at the start of the day. So was coin, but app was green a little later into the day. It just looked like it was showing more strength.
So there was a change in one of the signals inside of the Prospero app. I think we've hinted at it before this even happened, and it was mentioned in the newsletter, but institutional flow now turned into technical flow. And for our viewers, it'd probably be helpful if they could hear from the horse's mouth, the CEO of the company. Why was it important? Why was this change needed? And just what is the update with the signal itself that is now available to view right now if you guys have Prospero open?
Yeah, so it's been something we've been working on for a while, but wanted to make sure that we had it right. We've been tweaking the signal a little bit. It's been going in the newsletter, but we had some improvements for the stability of it. It was easier to just produce it on a weekend, but we wanted to make sure that it was going to be, kind of always on, always valuable. And yeah, our problem with institutional flow was that it really relied heavily on 13Fs, and 13Fs are always at least 6 weeks old. And not only 6 weeks old, but they're a snapshot of a single day at the end of the quarter, right? So institutions know they're going to file those 13Fs. So that is what they show you, right? So I'm inclined not to trust those numbers very much. And they're 6 weeks old too. So we always wanted to improve that. Technical flow is looking at some of the same, trade flow things, identifying institutional, behavior, but also bringing in the technicals, right? Because there's no technicals without institutions either, right? So we're combining a lot of RSI, MACD, EMAs, event-driven things like a golden cross or a TTM squeeze. There's a lot compressed into that number, and much like net option sentiment, we're trying to envelop all of the technical signals into one number, and I've been using it. I really like it, so we hope that you find it useful. Give it a try. If you're a technical trader, see what you think. I will say the one thing is we're also compressing a lot of times. So if you're looking at, say, on your 15-minute chart and saying, well, I think the technicals look good and technical flow is lower, that's why. We're actually leaning a little more on longer term technicals. I would say kind of the sweet spot of a lot of it is a day, but we go as far back as, I think 28 days and as high frequency as 15 minutes, right? But it's a spectrum. And like I said, if you're looking at kind of the center of the distribution on the time period, I'd say about a day, right? So if you're looking at your 1 day technicals, that's going to probably be what it syncs up with the most. But we use different time periods for everything. But again, it's just crunching it all into one number, which and scales against other companies, which is what we do and what we think makes our stuff so useful.
So I have two questions for you around it. So sometimes you need to get to know the signals a bit, and different levels for different companies mean different things. So how do you feel about technical flow? What levels, when you see it at, do you feel good? And then also, there's net option sentiment and upside breakout are kind of the two ones we really look at. You would maybe think of them as the most prominent signals that you use. Where does technical flow fit in the 10 signals that we have in importance to you when you're deciding whether you're going to buy or sell something?
I think the really nice thing about technical flow is, unlike net options or upside, where we say, okay, if you look at that number, it really depends on the market cap, it really depends on the sector because this runs higher or lower. Technical flow is a much more apples to apples comparison among stocks, because it's much more about price and price movements and trade flow, right? So that's the nice thing about it. It's 80 is pretty much always 80 or above is pretty much always going to be a good number regardless of sector. 20 or below is always going to be a bad number. And I kind of use it. I would say net options, upside and downside, those are the most important signals. But if I'm making shorter term decisions, I would say right after that is technical flow, and then social sentiment a bit behind all of those. And I always say I don't really like social sentiment as much, just because sometimes when it's peaking, that's when things are about to go. When the social sentiment hits a fervor, a lot of the times that's when institutions are all right, we might have peaked, it's time to sell, right? And the other signals, I would say, are much more we always say, net option sentiment, upside, if it's there, it's live, right? It's good, it's live options data, right? That's always my problem with social sentiment. It's why it's in between, because technicals, it's also the same kind of thing. Sometimes the higher the technical behavior gets, right, the more it's about to. But I would say technicals also very much mean, if there's good technicals, it's the other side is it means it's also likely to go up. So it's somewhere in between socials and net option sentiment. upside because like it's still that number that you can really believe in live, but it's got a little bit of that social sentiment to it where it's like sometimes when something's peaking, it means the party's over.
I think that was probably very helpful for people, so thank you for explaining. I see a comment from Mario. He's asking about SMCI with that deadline date being tomorrow now, I believe the February 25th. Crickets from SMCI, any thoughts on my short-term calls that are profitable and expire shortly after the drop dead date for delisting?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we got out. Because it's just, and we said this on our Discord, on Friday, where it just was too risky, right? Like, especially heading into close, if they don't file, that's an 80% loss, right? And that's why we got out of our, maybe that's just an estimate, but that would be my estimate of what kind of loss we were looking at. So, yeah, I would take profits. That's what we did on Friday, and obviously it was a hard day today, so we feel good about that decision. But these decisions are hard. If you're feeling really confident they're going to file, don't let us change your opinion. Net options is still the primary signal that we decide on. Like, for example, we added Carvana today. I mean, it didn't go well for us, and it was like a little bit outside of our normal thing. But Carvana was on a really big downslope, 28 net option sentiment. So that's still the dominant signal we're going to use. And then, upside, downside right after that. And then, after that, technical. But some people trade on technicals alone. So it's really a matter of preference. Obviously, I really prioritize net option sentiment, but there's no one rule, no one way to do this, but yeah, that's where I position it. But net options is still kind of the go, no go for me. If something has good net option sentiment, I just won't short it.
So looking at SMCI right now, it is down just 2% on the day, but I'm wondering if there could be some pretty wild volatility towards the end of the day if any news comes out or whatnot. But there was 4 stocks that I wanted to bring up today that had all made pretty big moves so far this year, and we're just almost 2 months in. So I wanted to bring them all up and then ask you which one is the craziest, most unexpected out of all of them. So we have Celsius stock that was performing so poorly, but after their earnings, they went insane, and now they're up 22% year to date for Celsius. And all these numbers were taken pre-market, so they could be a little different now. Alibaba up 62% year to date, Tesla down 11% year to date, and SMCI up 78% year to date. So of those 4 companies, which is the most surprising to you?
I mean, they're all pretty surprising, right? But I think you have to say SMCI. Like, I was shocked to see it starting to do well in our signals, but that's the nice thing about the signals, right? If I was in my old, methodology, there would be no way for SMCI to win me over. I would just be done with it, right? Because of the accounting thing, very hard to predict. But like, the metrics were so convincing that it swayed me. And I mean, that is just to have that comeback even before, like, they're just likely to do the filing. And that's kind of what you run into today, right? You have to assume that some people know some things, which is the only reason I got back in, which is like, hey, maybe some people know that the filing is going to happen. But yeah, pushing it right to the deadline is kind of crazy.
Just pulling the string on Alibaba a bit, because when I was before you were here in the stream today, I was looking with the chat at the short-term bull list, and 4 of the 10 companies were Baidu, Pinduoduo, Alibaba, and JD.com. Does that make you feel any extra bullishness, the fact that all 4 of them have like bull signals and they trade pretty similarly, or does that not affect your opinion on them? How do you feel about it?
I just looked at Michael Burry's positions, and I think those 4 stocks, or it was Baba, PDD, JD, and what was the other one? It was what?
Baidu.
Yeah. Those are his 4 largest positions. So, you always got to take Burry seriously. And the Alibaba thing, this is why I stay away from China. Like, I added it because it did so well on Friday, and then China's all down today. It's just so volatile and so hard to read. And like, after my experience today, I'll probably stay away for a really long time again. But yeah, it's especially with the tariff situation, right? A lot of these stocks got hammered on Friday because of the tariff situation and the consumer confidence. Yet the China stocks did well. Like, I get that some of that is Alibaba expects to do like Gen AI things. They have a model that's being used. But, now they announced a larger spend in AI on Monday, and I would think that the AI was what made it go up last week, and the larger spend is a bear event. So that's, you look at that, and that's why I always say China is incredibly hard to read for that reason.
So I just started thinking about like there was a Trump trade that was so bullish for so long, and I think some of the main ones were like Tesla, Palantir, and Coinbase. And now Tesla's down 11% year to date. Palantir, we've obviously covered. Coinbase, not too bullish earnings, like reaction from the market at least. Is the Trump trade over?
I mean, people like if he's going to war with Wall Street, right? The Trump trade might be over. Yes. I mean, it's and I didn't think he was going to war, right? Until I read that from Cohen and saw on Friday. Like, yeah, I think that's why the letter we talked about was called like "Don't F with our money," right? That's like I think it's highly concerning if Wall Street is pissed off, right? For the reasons that I'm saying, because Wall Street has no problem tanking the market and making money off of that, and I think we just have to be very concerned and looking out for that now that there's kind of been that warning shot.
So Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway reported their cash pile has grown to $334 billion. Pretty historic number right there. Seems like the turmoil we're seeing right now, Buffett has been preparing for all along, and he's still not ready to put any of that cash to work as the cash pile just keeps on growing. In the letter that they released, I feel like it was the first time that Buffett really pointed towards that he's nearing the end of his reign as the leader of Berkshire. How do you feel about the company with, I think Buffett is 94 in his last days, and I don't know, in his long-term perspective, maybe that means 5 to 10 years, but you never know. But how do you feel about them with an aging Buffett at the helm?
I mean, he still does the job, right? I think whoever the next person is, it's going to be very interesting. But knowing Buffett, I think he'll have, like, he's got tons of, pupils. I'm sure he'll have someone good. I would trust there to be a good handoff there. Now, what that means for the stock, I don't know, because even if there's a quote-unquote good handoff, there's no doubt when he steps down that the stock is going to take a hit, right? He's an absolute legend, and that's just what happens. People just, no matter how good the leader is, people anticipate there being an issue. But, yeah, it's going to be, I mean, Buffett has been like the guy that since I started. Like, I remember when I was at Columbia Business School, like, the professor that I worked for, like, knew Buffett. And I just thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. And like everybody looked up to him, even this, pretty famous professor that I worked for clearly, I don't want to say looked up to him, but, let's say revered, him as like this, brilliant guy that, created a lot of the thinking that value investors use, right? It was his letters to the shareholder. Like pretty much every value investor that I knew talked about the letters to the shareholder as the big thing. So yeah, I think that is, that's pretty huge, and it's going to leave, him leaving is kind of going to leave a gap in the markets.
I feel like what you said, Berkshire stock going down when he steps down, it's almost like a sign of respect that Wall Street has to show him, like when he finally leaves, like the importance that he had on that company and Wall Street for so long.
Yeah, it's sort of like whoever they put in there. You
I
know,
think
like they have to say like couldn't possibly be as good as him. You know.
yeah, the name I've heard that they say a lot is this guy Greg Abel, who has learned and been with by Buffett's side for a very long time. And another theory that I heard is that the reason they're building the cash pile to be so large is that they give the when the transfer happens, they give Greg the most amount of flexibility possible for him to begin his tenure as the guy in charge there. Do you think when this happens, obviously Buffett invested in Apple, but largely like he kind of stays out of the high growth tech stuff. Do you think with the changeover we could see them becoming more aggressive in the newer tech industry that they've kind of avoided for a while?
No, I am. Uh, I think whoever takes over, it's going to be a very similar strategy. Like Buffett have very strong like ideals, and like we're talking about, a lot of people look up to him. A lot of people follow his strategy. I think there might be some tweaks, right? There might be some new positions, but I don't see it being like, oh, I'm like, you know, I'm like Kathy Wood now. You know, I just don't see that big of a change. But I do think there can be perspectives on value, right? And one of the big things about value is you are projecting the future a little bit. So I could see a different projection of the future from the successor, but I don't see it deviating that far.
What about Bitcoin? I doubt Buffett would ever buy Bitcoin, but maybe the next person or a crypto related company.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're considering, I'm actually, looking at hiring a cryptocurrency analyst. One of the things that we're considering is looking at cryptocurrencies from a value perspective, right? And we're actually considering making a letter just for that, right? Where we're not looking at momentum, we're not looking at, meme coins. We're actually taking a look at the field, especially just like the field in blockchain, and figuring out what we think are the coins and companies that have staying power. So I could see like that's something that I'm actually pretty excited about. I could see something like that happening because crypto's here to stay, and someone could just have like I think some people that are so long in the tooth just don't see it. But I could see a younger person saying it's here, and we can look at crypto from a value perspective.
Well, I'm interested if any of our viewers have would like a crypto newsletter comment in the chat, if you would. And I wanted to bring up this other crypto topic today, so it's leading us into it nicely. Where Robinhood, we talked about how they had gotten a Wells notice, which I don't think it means any action has been taken, but it says that the SEC can take action in the future. But that was just dismissed by the SEC for their crypto unit, so they're no longer going to be facing any kind of investigation. And we've covered Coinbase, how Trump is supporting crypto. Does this further your thesis on the bullish momentum within the crypto industry with this action?
Is anyone like that surprised? Yeah, I mean, but the issue is that and this is a good lesson in our signals, right? The issue is, right, we're still more bullish on crypto than most things, right? But it's always a relative value thing. And we remind people, just because something has 100 net option sentiment, that just means the options markets like it more than other stocks. But that could also be because it's run a lot, right? And sometimes stocks that run a lot, even if the options markets are favorable to them, in the event that there's a sharp turn like Friday, those can move the most down because no stocks are really going to do well. Actually, the only stocks that have done well Friday today, and we shifted this a little towards them, are stocks that have been hit really hard. So we still like crypto. What that means with all this volatility, we don't know, but we still like it long term. It's one of the verticals that we like the most.
So there was another big news story that came out where Apple is now planning to spend $500 billion investing in the U.S. over the next 4 years. They're going to expand their AI portion of their big business in the U.S. I think they're planning some big things in Texas. But what I saw is that with this spending announcement, they're hoping to avoid some of the Trump tariffs that could possibly come out that would affect their China business. Do you think this move by them will work in that regard? And is it good for their business to be investing this heavily in the U.S.?
Sorry, I'm making a move.
What are we looking
Yeah,
at?
I mean, I think it's smart, right? It's a good way to hedge, and we already saw them. We already saw them doing this in India, right? I think diversifying from China is one thing, diversifying into the U.S. is another thing. It's all these hedges, right? I think we've kind of seen for a while that they're not that good on, innovations become a problem for them. So you have to if you can't innovate, you have to make smart business decisions. They're ahead of the curve. And I think that's just what they're trying to do. Now, if tariffs turn out not to be a problem, this could be a big overspend. But I think it's good risk management from a corporate strategy perspective.
And I think I saw they were saying there was no guarantee that they're going to actually spend this $500 billion. It's kind of just like a pledge, I guess. But if that were to be the case, and then a lot of Apple products were being made in the USA, wouldn't that mean that they would have to charge more over time, because that's the reason they left in the first place, to get cheaper labor? And
1,000%. Yeah.
So if that's the case, couldn't that kind of hurt their business if they're not able to keep the same margins, or if people aren't willing to pay the higher prices?
Well, I think the idea is that like prices might raise for everyone with the tariffs, right? So like they can capture that value themselves, or or basically the government will. And I feel like a lot of this could be kind of patriotism, where they expect the added value of like, oh, we're making things in America and people like them. There is kind of a like part of this political situation is it is a bit of a move to nationalism. So they could be kind of hedging on the manufacturing and hedging on the nationalism.
And I did see that I think they expect 20,000 jobs to be created because of this. Are you concerned at all with a lot of the job cuts we're seeing within the federal government now, that could affect the economy in a way that's not being priced in by the market right now? Or
definitely, that was one of the things that Steve Cohen was saying too, right? Like you can't remove just like $2 trillion from the economy and not expect that to have an effect on it, right? That's just like less money circulating, right? And I don't know what they're planning to do with that money, but if they're planning to pay down debt, like, yes, that's great to pay down debt, but that's still $2 trillion coming out of the economy. That's a lot, and that will no doubt hurt the economy. Now, might it be worth it if we're going to, put that to debt payments, because we have to do that eventually, and we're really heading towards something bad if we don't do that? Yes. But we're also hearing like distributions, like Doge distributing 20% of it. That's okay. That puts some money into that wouldn't be like, I don't think cutting government spending and then just handing it to people, 20% of it is the best way to handle that. I do think like if you're going to cut some things, it makes sense to do like things like what China's doing, spend on infrastructure. I would love to see that spending. One of the things that I've seen is that there would be tax cuts for the wealthy, right? Which is pretty much the worst thing that you can do. Taking money out of the economy and then giving tax cuts to wealthy people. So I hope that's not the case, but we'll see.
So I see your comment, Mario, and I'm about to get to it. But before I do, let me just ask everyone. We've had 17 likes on YouTube today. If we could hit 20, we are 3 away. That would be awesome. So if you haven't liked the video yet and you've enjoyed the topics, do that. But we have Mario asking, any thoughts on the comments about Microsoft reducing their data center capacity? Is this possibly a warning about overbuilding that will impact the major AI players, other major players?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of what we're talking about here. I think there's so many unknowns when you look at the field here. You're looking at you're kind of looking at people being worried about DeepSeek and how that'll change compute. We're not really sure about how these like tariffs are going to interact with the cost and everything. And, maybe, obviously things like cloud services are one of our exports, right? So maybe people are anticipating, hey, if there's tariffs, that there's going to be less demand for our exports, like compute. So I think there's a lot of unknowns, and I think this kind of seems like a similar hedge that Apple, like what Apple's doing, but in a different way, just making sure that they're people are preparing, I think, for a new world in different ways.
So with all of the unknowns going on in the USA, and we've covered a lot of them today, I was wondering, is it time for investors to look more internationally? I know Mercado Libre has been a stock that has often been looking bullish in our signals, and they recently had a better move. How are you feeling about looking outside of the US for business, or are the uncertainties outside of the US just as big?
I think the uncertainties outside of the US are just as big. I'm actually more concerned about other countries pulling money out of the US markets, right? Because I don't think a lot of US companies really have the appetite for that. But I am definitely worried about other countries pulling out.
So we've actually come to the end of our topics a bit early today, so I'll ask the chat if you have any questions that you want us to cover. Comment them now. While you guys are thinking and maybe typing, I will just ask George. There's been so much, maybe you'd call it speculation about these smaller companies on social media recently. Some of the ones that come to mind, I hate to bring it up for the people, but SoundHound, we covered Prospero.ai recently. Has this been a product of the bull market we've seen over the past 2 years, and we're kind of at like the end of that? And is that why people are able to, go out the risk curve and get excited about these companies, or does that happen all the time? With your experience, how do you see what's going on right now with the excitement?
I wouldn't mess with these small caps until we have more clarity on what's going on. I think it's pretty crazy, pretty unprecedented what we're seeing. And small caps are going to be the riskiest in times of volatility. And even before Friday, I think we were feeling that. But Friday, that huge shift, right? Consumer sentiment it's a big deal in the market, but not that big of a deal to have that day. And I just think we're seeing so much uncertainty. I would really, really stay away from small caps.
Well, I don't see any more comments in the chat right now, so you want to do the switch over, and we'll see you on the other side in the Prospero laboratory?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so everybody stick here with me. We'll be right back with George on the other side of this little intermission. I'll update you guys on how the markets are looking, how the Prospero.ai signals are viewing the market. Since the beginning of the stream, I haven't taken a check at them, so we'll do that now. Okay, it looks like the markets are taking a bit more of a bullish turn. Maybe we have hit the lows for the day. The QQQ is now down about 0.25%. And when we started the stream, I think it was near 0.75%. So we're seeing a bit of a positive shift in the overall markets. When we started, the Dow was the only green index. Now the SPY has joined it. And the IWM, the Russell, is just barely red on the day. So maybe that is headed to turning green as well. Let's take a look at the signals also. I see a new question from Jonathan. In order to add tickers to Prospero, do we just add the tickers into Discord? I'll let George answer that for you, Jonathan, but I think it's a little harder than that, and it takes a little bit longer, but we'll see what George has to say. I do see people mentioning tickers in the Discord, and I think that brings it onto the Prospero team radar, and then they'll get added quicker than maybe they otherwise would have. So I don't think it can hurt you by doing that. Okay, I'm looking at the SPY net options sentiment now, and it is at 0 still. So no positive trend in that as of yet. And the QQQ was at 3 when we started, and it is still at 3. So both the QQQ and the SPY net options sentiment has not seen a bullish uptick yet, although the market throughout the stream today has been able to find some footing. Hopefully you guys enjoyed all the topics we covered. I thought it was a pretty good stream. We jumped from topic to topic pretty quickly today, straight to the point. And if you guys wanted to relive that technical flow description, I'm going to be posting it probably tomorrow on Twitter, and I'll probably be posting it on Substack as well, like a 3 to 5 minute video, condensed version of it. So if you want to rewatch that, take it all in again, get a second wind of it, you can look out for that video, probably coming out tomorrow on our socials. Let's take a look now in the Prospero app if any big shifts have occurred. Looks like all of the companies on the short-term bull list that were there this morning. I don't think there's any changes as of right now. Something that might be interesting to you guys is maybe we'll take a look at Nvidia ahead of their earnings on Wednesday and how they are looking in the signals. Do we have any Nvidia shareholders watching in the chat right now? How are you guys feeling heading into this Wednesday's report? All right, so I have Nvidia pulled up. We have a 55 upside with a 30 downside, and then a 92 net option sentiment, 90 social sentiment, 69 technical flow for Nvidia, 61 short pressure, kind of high for a company that size. I'm curious. I wonder what like Apple and Microsoft short. Let's see. Short interest is 18 for Apple, and Microsoft is why is it not popping up? Okay, and so Microsoft is 2. Wow, so that's such a higher level of like short bets on Nvidia than Microsoft and Apple. I wonder if that's telling. I'm going to ask George about that when he gets back in here. D. Curtin said, if SMCI were to file today, would we then expect to see an entry? That's a great question. We'll see what George has to say when he gets back in here. Let's take a look at SMCI's signals to see if we've seen any shift as that deadline is just ticking ever closer. So we're still seeing a 74 upside combined with a 50 downside, 61 net option sentiment, 89 dark pool, and 80 short pressure. So it looks like no matter what, one way or the other, we're going to see a big move and a lot of volatility very soon for SMCI. That net option sentiment is down though from the recent trend, and it's a decent spike lower. So it was as high as 90 on February 11th, and then it was kind of trending slightly lower, mid 80s, low 80s, and now it's at 61. So I know it's never good to see a trend like that usually in the signal. So I'm very curious to see how this SMCI saga plays out. It's been one of the more entertaining companies to watch the past year, really a year plus now, with the AI saga we've been seeing going on. George, we got some questions for you while you were doing the switchover. If people add tickers to Prospero Discord, is that the best way to get it added?
Yeah, that's what we'll circle back to for sure when we can, but it's probably going to be a few weeks still.
Then SMCI, if they were to file today, would we expect to see an entry from you?
Probably, maybe tomorrow. Like, we'll see. Like, it depends on what price we can get it on at when we can time, but we'll be looking to for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then for me, something I'm curious about is we checked out Nvidia since they have the earnings, and I saw they have a 60 short pressure in Prospero. And I think we looked at Apple and Microsoft, the only comparable in size companies, and it was like 2 and 13. So does that, like the volume of short bets on Nvidia for being a over $3 trillion company, that has to be pretty high to be 60, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern. Like a lot of people bet against Nvidia. I think typically, like when it runs, people bet against it. But yeah, it's hard. Like it's a hard company, especially with this news event.
And we'll be live just before their earnings later this week on Wednesday. We go live 3 p.m. So you could all tune back in and get the latest thoughts on it just before the earnings come out.
Okay. You know what? I think I'm just doing too many things. I'm not going to do the model portfolio today.
Okay. So we're going to end right then?
I'm going to do it more at the end of the day. Yeah, when I have more data.
All right, so everybody, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully it was a very valuable time for you today. I think we covered a lot of topics and we got to explain technical flow. So, but we're going to wrap it up here today. We'll be back live Wednesday, 3 p.m. Maybe the market will be slightly greener, who knows? But until then, hopefully you have a great rest of your day and we'll see you all then. Thank you, George.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.